So today I'm going to talk about a 2020 study on childhood maltreatment and the clinical characteristics of major depressive disorder in adolescence and adulthood. For some context, worldwide, 1 in 3 children is a victim of maltreatment, and children who experience maltreatment are 2 to 3 times more likely to develop depression later in life, and they're also less likely to be responsive to antidepressants than people who have depression but were not mistreated during childhood. They also have higher rates of comorbidity and higher rates of suicide attempts. The researchers in the study wanted to know, are emotional, physical, and sexual childhood maltreatment differentially associated with the severity and course of depression? How will the various maltreatment types influence comorbidity? And how does maltreatment from fathers versus mothers influence MDD and comorbidity with MDD? They had a few hypotheses, and those were that emotional maltreatment will have independent associations with a greater severity and greater number of episodes of MDD than physical and sexual maltreatment. Physical and sexual maltreatment will have independent associations with higher rates of anxiety and PTSD, and maltreatment perpetuated by mothers will be more strongly associated with all the clinical characteristics of MDD than maltreatment by fathers. There were 575 participants in this study, and 76% of those were female. The age range was between 12 and 70 years old, with the average being 27.88. To qualify, obviously, the participants had to have major depressive disorder, but they also could not meet the criteria for psychotic disorder, bipolar disorder, substance dependence, a developmental disability, or acute suicidality. They were recruited from advertisements or clinician referrals. 47.8% of participants had another disorder in addition to MDD, and those included various anxiety disorders such as panic disorder, a specific phobia, generalized anxiety disorder, also PTSD, OCD, bulimia, anorexia, and ADHD. So the study was conducted using the childhood experience of care and abuse, which is a semi-structured contextual interview that assesses the quality of parental care and experiences of maltreatment up to age 18. And during this, participants were encouraged to tell their story, and they were asked to provide specific details and examples, but they were not asked to share their feelings about their experiences, just the experiences themselves. In addition to an interviewee and an interviewer, there was also an independent rater who was unaware of the interviewee's psychiatric profile, and they used a manual of over 500 standardized examples to match each interview detail with a rating point. Those rating points were 1 through 5, with 5 being the highest marked, 4 being moderate, 3 some, 2 little, and 1 none. And the variables that they were looking at were emotional maltreatment from the mother, emotional maltreatment from the father, physical maltreatment from the mother, physical maltreatment from the father, and relative perpetuated sexual maltreatment and non-relative perpetuated sexual maltreatment. So as for the results, it was found that greater depression severity was associated with the severity of emotional maltreatment from the mother and the severity of non-relative perpetuated sexual maltreatment, but it was not significantly associated with the other maltreatment types. And it was also found that as the participants got older, the severity of emotional maltreatment from the mother, the severity of physical maltreatment from the father, and the severity of non-relative perpetuated sexual maltreatment were found to increase significantly. And also, lifelong depression was not found to be associated with physical maltreatment, but it was associated with emotional and sexual maltreatment. PTSD was found to be associated with emotional maltreatment by the father, but not by the mother. And the theory that the study had for this was based on some studies from 2018, where they essentially found that the perception of fathers versus mothers by children was more threatening and therefore more likely to cause PTSD. Participants who experienced emotional maltreatment by the father and or sexual maltreatment in general were 3 to 4 times more likely to develop PTSD in addition to depression. As for anxiety, emotional maltreatment by the father made participants 2 times as likely to develop an anxiety disorder on top of depression. It was found that a participant's history of physical maltreatment was not significantly related to MDD, but emotional and sexual maltreatment were significantly similar in associations with MDD in that they were quite high. This contrasted to previous research from 1992, which basically said that emotional maltreatment was the most associated with MDD, whereas sexual and physical maltreatment were less so. Ethnicity was also looked at, but it was not found to be a significant factor in this study. Some of the limitations from this study were that it relied on reports of people experiencing depression, and people with MDD are more likely to remember experiences as negative or abusive, whether or not they actually were. And the other thing to keep in mind is that there is recall bias in that memories change over time and events are not likely to be remembered exactly as they happened. And there's also no way to know whether memories of childhood are accurate. And if you're interested in knowing more, you can go read the full article, which should be linked right below this post.